The president landed here. He landed in the second half of the World Cup match between France and Belgium, which just concluded. And so because the game was going on, the motorcade had no problem getting to the ambassador's residence. Almost no traffic on the streets here in Brussels while the president was traveling. That game has since ended. You can tell behind me it's a little bit of a subdued atmosphere here in Brussels. The Belgian team lost to France 1-0. But tomorrow we're going to see a little bit more tension here internationally and geopolitically. And that's because of the NATO summit. We've seen this sort of war of words here over the past 24 hours as the president has been on his way. He's very critical of U.S. NATO allies for not spending enough on their defense. He says the American taxpayers are getting a raw deal as a result. European leaders so far have been signaling that they're willing to confront the U.S. president. Donald Tusk, the European Council president, saying today that the president ought to pay a bit more attention to his allies rather than his strategic rivals like Vladimir Putin of Russia, who the president is going to meet with next week. And of course, that Putin meeting next week is sort of the shadow that's hanging over this entire NATO session that we're expecting tomorrow. So a lot to be determined tomorrow. How will this go? It's anybody's guess at this point. Wilfred?
I know Wilfred wants to talk soccer with you, but first on NATO. I mean, isn't Trump correct, Eamon, when he makes these kind of accusations and claims, whether that's the point or not? It looks like only the U.S., UK, Estonia, and Greece actually meet the 2% expectation for payments to NATO.
Yeah, that's right. That was a plan that was put out in 2014. All the NATO nations committed that eventually they would get to 2% of GDP spending. There's only right now about 4 countries that are expected to get there. We think they're going to put out some new expectations here from NATO that will suggest that they've got commitments from more countries to do even more in terms of defense spending. But the president's right. The problem here is that the Europeans here on the ground get very prickly when the president conflates a bunch of issues in terms of NATO dues, so to speak, and defense spending of these countries on their own militaries. The president tweeted today that raising the possibility that they would have to reimburse the United States for past years, and that's not going to fly very well here in Europe.
Eamon, we know the president likes a tough negotiation, that he respects strength in his opponents, and perhaps why he warms somewhat to President Putin. I know when I'm in London and for that part of the trip, it's going to be an added problem for Prime Minister Theresa May, as the president put it earlier, somewhat in turmoil, I think was his phrase. What about the other European leaders? Is that a big factor in terms of whether he's likely to warm to a Macron versus a Merkel?
Well, look, I mean, you've got the president coming here. He's in a very strong political position right now vis-a-vis Angela Merkel of Germany, who's got domestic political problems of her own. Theresa May, as you know, domestic political problems of her own. Macron is dealing with his own situation. So at this point, the president's got a strong political hand as he comes in here to NATO. The question is, how much will these NATO allies want to confront the president of the United States ahead of that Vladimir Putin meeting next week and signaling maybe some dissension in the ranks here in NATO?
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.